Bless the President of our country, that she may be a light of peace among the people and a blessing to other nations on earth. We pray for our Prime Minister and members of the Cabinet, for the members of the Senate and the House of Assembly, and those who make our laws, for the judges and officers of our courts. Give courage, wisdom, and foresight, that human rights may be safeguarded and justice served. For our youth, the leaders of the future, we thank you for the energy and enthusiasm and the potential that they have. We ask that, inspired by your spirit, our young people will have courage to speak out against the scourges of violence within our nation. And they may use such opportunities as today to hone their skills as they play their part in serving faithfully in their generation and ours, to the honor and glory of your holy name. Amen. And now, as our Savior has taught us, so we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session.
Okay. Announcements by His Honor the Speaker, messages from Her Excellency the President, petitions, papers, government notices, private members, notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first reading of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day. Government business.
Government business.
Order number one. In the name of the Honorable Prime Minister and the leader of government business, to move the passing of a resolution that the Barbados National Youth Parliament present a communique to the Ministries of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs and Youth and Community Empowerment, calling for a national action plan on violence and measures to reduce violence in the communities, schools, and homes, including, but not limited to, the creation of the information campaigns using current data to raise public awareness to the existence and extent of violence against marginalized groups, including the disabled, women, and LGBTQI community. The creation or expansion of training programs for parents with the aim of preventing violence by reinforcing safe, stable, and nurturing relationships between children and their parents and caregivers. Creation of mandatory social development programs in the schools with the requirement that all school-aged children participate in a formal extracurricular activity. Reducing the appeal and availability of alcohol by raising alcohol prices and repurposing the NCSA to create a fit for purpose program for chronic drinkers. Creation or expansion of victim identification, care, and support programs by the Royal Barbados Police Force. Denounce violence in all its forms and encourage a zero-tolerance approach to violence of any kind in Barbados. And B, call for the Public Affairs Department to adequately publicize the agencies available to assist victims of such violence and for a whole of Barbados approach encompassing the private sector, government, and the third sector in addressing violence.
I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister and Leader of Government Business. Before you start, I am informed that we have the Director of Youth Affairs, the Clerk of Parliament, the Principal Youth Development Officer, and my good friend, Mr. Smith, in the public gallery. Leader of Government Business, you have the floor.
Okay. I'm told I have to start over the presentation, but I have no issues with that. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, I rise with great excitement to speak on the issue of violence in this country, Barbados. I rise with great passion to speak on the issues facing our young people in Barbados. Just last week in another space, speaking before these honorable members, I had the opportunity to say, I had a heavy heart. A heavy heart because of the state of affairs in Barbados as it relates to violence. I want to speak to you, honorable members, and the people of Barbados, and tell you about an African proverb. I'm sure some of you may think it's a Caribbean proverb because we accept it as well, but it's the simple notion that it takes a village to raise a child. Now that proverb isn't anything that requires any scientific breakdown, any legal analysis. It simply is the concept that the community is also responsible for the development of people and young people in Barbados. Back in the days across the Caribbean, even in Barbados, we had a situation where Miss Mavis could talk to Mr. Maynard, grandson, and say, listen, my man, pull up them pants. My man, the streetlights coming on, you ain't got homework to do. We live in a country now where people are afraid. I don't want to talk to any young person and tell them, you're going down the wrong way, because you fear what the response might be from that young person. Now, I'm not here to blame and bash young people. The people in the public do that enough. I'm here to remind Barbadians that they have a responsibility to play their part in the development of young people. Once upon a time, and I say once upon a time deliberately because it seems like a fairy tale moment, the church understood they had a role to play in society. Once upon a time, you would hear stories of young people getting up together, and going down to church on Sunday morning, or even Saturday morning for Sabbath school. In fact, I know of people who went to both church on Saturday and then had to get up and go to church on Sunday. We don't have that culture anymore. We live in a society now where preachers from the pulpit say that young people are evil. These young people are disgusting. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want us to remember and remind ourselves that we have to be our brother's keeper. The Prime Minister said it some time ago that, we are all a part of the same neighborhood. Barbados is our country. And if you lived in a neighborhood and you saw there was a young fella coming through doing some weird things, you would call your neighbor and say, well, listen, this young man came through here. I don't understand what is he doing. We need to pay attention to this and do something about it. But we live in a society now where people lock their doors, close their windows, and what is out there has nothing to do with me. That is not the position we should be taking as Barbadians. Our young people need us. Today we have lost that sense of village. We're in an age where families no longer live together. We've lost that sense of, cohabitation and coming together. Uncle could speak to nephew, grandmother could speak to stepson. That type of, we don't have that anymore. So we're leaving our children to be raised by Uncle Netflix and Auntie YouTube. No real guidance, Mr. Speaker. In today's Barbados, there aren't many young people that you want to or feel comfortable pulling aside and saying, well, hey, I want you to do a little better. Only a few take kindly to this type of instruction and guidance and advice. Now, for those of you who may say that, this village thing is hogwash, it's not necessary. What you're talking about, you're confusing Bajans. We want that. White people in my business, you shouldn't be telling my child nothing. You ain't push them out. I am a product of the village. Many people don't know, but I grew up running around in Bush Hall. I know what it is to sit under the tamarind tree with the fellas. I know what it is to see people passing and pushing drugs. I grew up in that type of community. Now you see me here standing as Prime Minister of Barbados National Youth Parliament, and you think, that is a young man we want our young people to be like. Why you can't be more like he? Understand that it took a village to raise me. The church played a part in my development. the Seventh-day Adventist Church was a critical element in me understanding that I have a responsibility to other people. I'm not simply here to live for myself. I have a responsibility to look out for other young people. The Allen School played a great role in my personal development. My teachers took special interest in how I would do leaving school. I am a product of the village. The Ministry of Youth, Mr. Speaker, sir, has played an important role in my development professionally and personally. We see these young persons here, and I'm happy to see that we're bringing back this spirit of youth parliament, because you young people must understand that people came before you, and they were a product of this village. Youth Parliament is a developmental program so that you can understand that you are lending your voice. You are lending your voice in this honorable house for the representation of other young people in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, I grew up with a community that understood we need to look out for him and we need to look out for others like him. I didn't grow up with a lot of fancy things. I was never one of the children to go to school with the North Face and, the special brands. I didn't have that luxury. But I understood my education was important, and my teachers understood that they needed to play a role in my development. We have teachers now who throw up their hands and say, not me, Miss Thing, die my problem, die my child. No, it isn't written in their job description, but you have a responsibility to look out for young people who are in your care. Teach them some moral values. And I'm framing this to share that, young people need spiritual guidance. Whether you take them to church or the masjid or the temple, they need spiritual guidance. They need to understand that there's something bigger than them. You are not God. You don't give, nor should you take life. Mr. Speaker, sir, I just want us to disillusion ourselves from this idea of what the ideal young person should be and should look like. Now, I shared my story with you today. I shared personal accounts of the fact that I grew up in a neighborhood that had violence. I didn't grow up with much at home. I had a difficult family circumstance, but here I am today. I just finished graduating from UE, praise God. And that was through provisions by this government that understood that education is an important element in the self-identification of young people in this country. It's a vision that we long understood when free education was provided in this country. We have a situation in Barbados that is unlike many places. Now, despite what some may argue or some may believe, young people aren't born violent. No child comes out the womb waving a gun. As a matter of fact, one minister of education said, the children got in demons. I refuse that statement, Mr. Speaker. I refuse that statement. Our young people are bright. Our young people need guidance. Now, studies will tell you that the first 7 years of a child's development is when they're most impressionable. So their brains are plastic and they're responsive to change. Therefore, unsafe conditions, negative interactions, can lead to irreversible outcomes, which can affect the child's future for the remainder of their lives. Now, based on this type of reasoning, it is imperative that the interventions we need to prevent violence in this country start from young. Now, some may question, well, why is the honorable member going over the village and children? We're not here to debate children's rights, but I'm telling you that those first 7 years of a child's life are critical. And that is where we need to start our interventions. That is where we need to start targeting young people for the future. The horse has left the stable in some instances. We can't pull some back, but we can start now to ensure that we don't have a future where we have 7 and 20 murders in 1 week. Barbados has a exemplary social system. Only in Barbados, you can come as a CARICOM national and have access to free education and free healthcare. Barbados has a social system that looks out for our young people. We have state-sponsored childcare services. We have daycares that, you can take the children to so they can work on their development. You have to go to work. We have a care system for that. We have organizations that focus on parent education. I want to give kudos to Barbados for the work it has been doing in parent education over the years. We have charitable organizations that have stepped up to the plate to play their part in the representation of young people. Organizations like the Faith Marshall Harris Sandy Lane Charitable Trust Helpline has played an important role.
No, you have 2 more minutes.
Played an important role in protecting young people in Barbados. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, the issue of today is ensuring that we have protections for our young people, ensuring that there's some way that we can support them. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am happy to stand with this government and propose our national plan of action. It is what we consider to be not a complete, but first step in the right direction of changing the trajectory for the lives of many young people. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll turn to the resolution in a minute as I prepare to close. To point out a few things. Mr. Speaker, we're speaking and we're asking for this support. And I'm telling you now that there should be no politicizing of pertinent issues. This is an issue that affects both of us. So whether you sit on the government or whether you sit on the opposition, violence is an issue that affects each and every one of you. So this isn't a moment for us to stand and be pompous in political persuasions about why what is being said by the government isn't necessary. It is a moment for us to stand together, hold hands across the divide to ensure that we put relevant programs in place for young people. Mr. Speaker, we are speaking about the protection of marginalized groups. I'll leave the honorable leader of the opposition to speak more about the situation with domestic violence in Barbados, but we need to ramp up our laws. We need to look at protection of the LGBTQ community in Barbados. And I'll pause a moment. Until we have legal recognition of these people in our country, there can be no legal protection for them. If you don't recognize that in Barbados legally, there's this thing called same-sex couples, then how can you have domestic laws to protect them? Necessarily, we need to go a step further. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the creation and expansion of training programs for parents. I mentioned Barbados, and we want to go a bit further with that. And this government is suggesting that these programs should aim at preventing violence by reinforcing safe, stable, and nurturing relationships between children and their parents and caregivers. And we have the Child Care Board as an institution which focuses on that type of development. And I'll say a bit more in my closing speech about what reform needs to happen with the Child Care Board, but I'll continue. We need the creation of mandatory social development programs in schools. Now, as I'm telling you, I was a product of social programs at school. Debating society. I was a part of the choir for a little bit. I used to do some hiking up at Aline. I tried basketball for a little bit. I even played netball. Social programs can help our young people to be gainfully engaged. Doing things, there's a saying, I don't know if it's in the Bible, we tend to put a lot of things in the Bible, but the devil finds work for idle hands. We are promoting and asking for the support for us to put forward gainful programs, supportive developmental programs for young people in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, I'm wrapping up. We're talking about reducing the appeal and availability of drugs, alcohol to our young people. Now, this is a point that pains me. I don't know if the powers that be know, but it's very easy for young people to get access to drugs in this country. It's very easy for young people to get access to drugs in this country. And so we talk about the regulation of alcohol, but the government wants to go a step further and look at other substances. If you look at the Barden report from 2020, you will see some staggering, scary statistics about the availability of drugs to young people in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are saying that this needs a whole of country, whole of government approach. It is not a me issue, it is not a you issue, it is a Barbados thing that we need to work together for. Mr. Speaker, we need that village. And until we bring ourselves back to that place, that Christian understanding that you and the people of Barbados has a role to play in the development of young people, we will continue to see the issues we're having today. Mr. Speaker, I'm much obliged.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that this resolution be passed.
I second this.
Honorable members, I'm also informed that we have 3 specially invited guests in the public gallery who will be ensuring or judging your adherence to parliamentary procedure, public speaking skills, and what's not. So I recognize the presence of Ms. Sophia Skeet, Ronald Bullen, and it's so good to see also Ms. Gloria Haynes. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Now recognize the leader of the opposition.
Thank you, sir. Good morning again. Today is very emotional for me, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I'd like to begin by reinforcing the point that violence is not an issue that we can politicize, but it is a whole of country, whole of government, whole of Barbados approach that we need. And before I criticize the resolution, I want to highlight and commend a few things and a few actions of the government and one private sector entity in particular. I commend the government's effort to keep persons employed via these contractual arrangements. And I don't call it an effort because it worked. The move to keep persons employed. I also commend the government's move to keep university students in school free of charge. And I can safely say that last year, October, just about 1,000 Barbadian students graduated, and they were the first cohort. And coming this October, just about another 1,000 will graduate as a second cohort to benefit from this free education. Every single positive initiative that we implement keeps young persons occupied and keeps, as the leader of government business said, keeps idle hands at work. The private sector company that I'd like to commend is Chukka, that now has control or more or less manages Harrison's Cave. Because, as you know, that is right above the community. Harrison's Cave is right below the community of Allen View, St. Thomas. And if you walk through Allen View now, you'll see that more or less the block culture, I'm from Allen View, sir, I will know, the block culture is slowly disappearing because Chukka engaged the residents and helped employ the residents. And I urge more private sector companies to engage the residents in the vicinity of your business and help eliminate this block culture, just as Chukka is doing in St. Thomas. It is emotional for me, sir, as I have to speak on mentorship. And I think that we as Barbadians need to return to that genuine act of mentorship. And I put genuine before mentorship for a particular reason, sir. Gone are the days when persons were proud to bring at-risk youth from struggling and going down a wrong path, and being proud to make them be able to support themselves and survive in society and thrive. We speak about persons on the block looking at dons as mentors. And they do whatever these dons say because they look up to them. They feel as though they're mentors to them. But sir, more and more we recognize that, and it's a general complaint for young people, we recognize that there are mentors on the right side of the law, and I don't want to use the word gangsters, but they can be just as much gangsters. I didn't want to use it. But they can just be as dangerous as persons on the wrong side of the law. And I'll explain. Mentors know that they can snap their fingers and crush everything that they have helped that at-risk youth to build if they don't do as they say. And we need to move away from that culture and get back to genuine mentorship, where we're proud to help someone build their character, proud to help them be able to survive in this society, and proud to help them to do great things. Not just make them feel as though they owe the mentor their lives. Sir, I move on now to speak on amnesties. And this is emotional for me as well. Like anything else, amnesties can go good or amnesties can go bad, and gun amnesties in particular. And I bring some statistics with me from Namibia. They had one which ran from the 1st to the 30th of September 2021, and the citizens were promised that they would not be prosecuted for any illegal guns they brought in because it's an amnesty. And this is an example of an amnesty gone bad because the powers that be then changed their mind and said, look, we're locking up all of them when they brought in those guns. In 2021, South Africa destroyed just about 25,000 guns that were submitted during the amnesty, and this is an example of an amnesty gone good. And they melted the guns, sir, because they were adamant that these illegal guns were not to make it back on the streets. And I think that we in Barbados, this is 2022, we in Barbados need to find creative ways to make amnesties attractive to our gun holders. Because I won't call a figure because I was chastised for calling a figure, but I say 10,000. But let's use 10,000 for example, for argument's sake. Now, pray tell me, who's gonna buy a gun for $10,000 and come and submit it to you just because you say you ain't gonna lock them up?
Honorable Member, you have 2 more minutes.
Got it. I'd like to speak on domestic violence as I prepare to close, sir. Another entity that I'd like to commend is the Royal Barbados Police Service and the Family Conflict Intervention Unit, as this 4-man unit fights crime in Barbados relative to domestic violence, sir. 4 people. Well, they had 5 when it was top cop back in my day. But, sir, in 2019, 433, 2020, 402, and these are some numbers of our domestic violence reported cases. And while we were trying to protect persons from the virus COVID-19, there was another virus waiting in the household called abuse. And this is something that we need to deal with. And sir, as I prepare to close, it is even more emotional for me as I reflect on the times that I accompanied victims of domestic violence, particularly battered women, to court. And sir, we need to, I might get chastised for this, we need to empower our women some more and remind them how much they're worth. Because there's no way, sir, that in 2022, our women should be going to court and pleading for a protection order with a broken arm or a broken neck. And when the court case comes back up next month, they're pleading for that protection order to go because they love this man. And that is their man. Sir, we need to empower our women. We need more programs that do such. And sir, finally, as I close, I do not believe that a fatherless household should lead to any act of violence or any person trying to become some Top Gun. And I say this because, sir, I grew up in a fatherless household all my life. And it took me about 20 years to find out that I have a brother right beside me by the name of Nikolai Peters. I had to meet the guy in youth parliament, and we both grew up fatherless, and we're here together. So a fatherless household, sir, should be no excuse for violence. Sir, the opposition wishes today to provide solutions and aid the government and assist them in whatever they need. And as I close, sir, we will peruse the subject of mentorship. We will peruse the subject of rehabilitation. And sir, we will discuss how these things will be financed. And sir, one other point I wanted to make as I wrap up is...
This is the fifth time.
You know, sir, when the plane is landing. Right, as I wrap up though, sir, the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment did play a big role in all of our lives. But, sir, this is not a lash at the Ministry of Youth. This is a lash at a leader of government business. They say here that we are consulting the Ministry of Youth and the Ministry of People Empowerment on this action plan and doing this mass broadcast. Sir, are we going to put poor Director Hunt and PYDO in blue and red to fight crime? We need the AG's office. We need the Barbados Police Service. We need these people. We don't... Come on. I'm sure Director Hunt is not going out there fighting any crime in this day and age.
What point do you raise, leader of government business?
I rise on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. I am saddened. The honourable member said that he felt a bit, emotional. I feel emotional now that he would suggest such atrocities. I wouldn't expect Director Hunt to go out and fight crime. The government is simply suggesting...
Leader of government business, I will caution you if you had permission to invoke a person's name in this house.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I continue to clarify the misdirection that the opposition leader was proposing to take the honorable people down. The government is suggesting that the social programs, the same programs that he said help him, the social programs at the Ministry of Youth be a part of the National Action Plan to prevent violence in Barbados. It is a given that the police will be involved. It is a given that we would work with the armed forces, but we are saying we need divergent tactics. So don't mislead the sensible people of Barbados to tell them that we want the director to head out there. We have youth officers. I'll remind the honorable member, he was one.
Wow.
Who can go into the community and play a role in helping to get young people into these social programs that can get them involved in useful things. The same things we want young people to find to do.
Thank you.
Who, thanks you, sir. I'm glad that we got that clarity. We had to pull it out of him, We had to give him a nudge. But, sir, I am glad that we can recognize that the youth commissioners and everyone else in the ministry do implement programs in the community. However, we need a bit more. And, sir, as I said, the opposition, I am not sure that my team is satisfied with this resolution, as they call it, but we will see how the debate goes today and the engagement between the two sides. And I honestly am not against the resolution. I am against the way it is worded, sir. but I would not want to let us hold back this issue on implementing programs to stop this violence any longer. So I thank you, sir, and I'm much obliged to you.
Thank you. Honorable member, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, honorable members of this chamber. Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, as I was preparing for this debate, I couldn't even attend. I sat at home and I watched a former schoolmate of mine. We went to Barbados together. Then we graduated from the St. Michael School together. I watched him be laid to rest, Mr. Speaker. And during the service, I was extremely amazed with his parents, Mr. Speaker. They said they had to find purpose in pain. And I'm here to say today that I no longer want any parents to find purpose in pain, Mr. Speaker. How many more parents have to lose their children before we can understand that we have to turn this around? He died by the gun. But we don't just have a gun violence problem in this country. We have a problem with violence in this country. I want this honorable chamber to cast their minds back to 2019, November, when a young man lost his life. He was at school, a place where he was supposed to be getting his education, right? But he lost his life, and that was not by the gun. In 2020, and I'm very glad that the leader of the opposition would have highlighted those statistics. In 2020, 243 million girls, and you can check UN if you don't believe me, women and girls were victims of domestic violence. Here in Barbados, 38% of women and girls were affected during the lockdown because they were locked with their perpetrators. So I'm here to say again that we don't just have an issue with gun violence, we have an issue with violence. And that is why I had to rise today to lend my voice to this discussion as it relates to this resolution. Mr. Speaker, the resolution speaks to using data to create public awareness for marginalized groups in society. Now, the government is not saying that these marginalized groups in society have more weight or hold more weight than other groups in society. But what we're trying to say, Mr. Speaker, is that these groups in society need not to be overlooked. The reality is that a gun violence case gets more airtime than a domestic case. We go on social media and we say a lot of nasty things when we see these cases being presented. The truth is that a gun violence case gets more airtime than a disability case, than cases against women and girls, and then persons within the LGBT community. We as a world, we just celebrated Pride Month last month. How can we say that we support these persons, but when it comes to violence against them, we are brushing it to the side? So with this point, the government's intention is to say, hey, yes, we understand that there are groups in society that do face violence, but we cannot overlook these groups in society. And I want us to pay close attention to the language that's being used in this resolution. It is saying including and not limited to. A movie trailer shows you what is intended to happen in the movie. It does not show you the full movie. So I want us to pay close attention to the language being used in this resolution. And why do we want to create awareness for these groups? What does awareness do? When persons are aware of situations, Mr. Speaker, they educate themselves more. When I hear about things, I educate myself because I want to know. And then when I educate myself, then I can educate others.
Ma'am, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just going to ask all those members to silence their phones and those in the gallery, because we are streaming and I need to hear the speeches, the contributions of all members, or else you may have to leave this chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So when them persons are educated, they can have a conversation. And what happens when persons have conversations? We see all kinds of movements starting, Mr. Speaker. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement. That came as a result of a young lady taking out her phone and disseminated that video via social media. And that created awareness. That was awareness. And then because of that, change occurred, and that is what the government is saying by creating awareness of these marginalized groups in society. We want to get that change. We want to have those conversations. We want persons to be on alert. We want persons to educate themselves and say, hey, yes, there are groups in society that need to be highlighted. Because this topic, and I'm very glad the leader of government just mentioned it, this topic has no room for discrimination. Because this is a topic that affects every single person. So there's no room for discrimination, and that's what the government is simply saying in this resolution. Mr. Speaker, the second topic that I want to speak on as relates to this resolution is the creation / the expansion of training programs for parents and students. Yesterday, somebody said to me, children are like sponges.
Yeah, about 2 more minutes now.
2 more minutes? I'll wrap up shortly, Mr. Speaker. Children are like sponges. They soak up everything and then they squeeze it out, Mr. Speaker. Creating stable, loving, nurturing homes for these children would allow them to soak up that love. Again, we don't want to have toxic environments for children, and then they're soaking up all of that negativity, and then they're going into the society and they're squeezing it out. So we just can't create programs for children solely because you'll be creating a program for a child. As I said before, a child is like a sponge, and they will be learning from that. But then the child is going home in the toxic, unhealthy environment, and everything that they would have learned in that program is being eroded. So we have to get to the root of the problem. The parents. So we just can't solely create programs for the child. We have to create for the parents as well. And why is this important? Because it's hard raising a human being, Mr. Speaker. We were not placed here with instructions. And we as a government, we understand that. So we are here to say, hey, we're going to hold your hand through this because some persons may be stressed from the pandemic, Mr. Speaker. And then as a result, they take out that frustration on the children. But we're here to say as a government, we understand and we're here to help. Mr. Speaker, this resolution, I'm wrapping up now.
I'm holding this because I don't want the leader of opposition get up and say that he's ready for lunch.
Oh, yeah, yes, I'm wrapping up. Mr. Speaker, this resolution is not, we understand that this will not eradicate violence in this country right away, but we're here to say this is our foundation because you don't start to build a house at the top. You have to lay the foundation, Mr. Speaker. So we understand that this will not eradicate violence right away, but we're here to say, hey, this is our proposal. This is our foundation. You know, Mr. Speaker, this is our foundation. And persons may argue, why are we going to consult with the private and the private sector and the third sector? Because we, as the leader of government simply said, this is a holistic approach. We can't do this alone. We have to understand as a government, how are these other persons in society being affected by gun violence, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Speaker, with that being said, I support this resolution, and I hope that it's passed. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you. I recognize the honorable member Holder.
Good morning. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, it is clear that everyone here agrees that violence is a national issue. We agree that this is not an issue that should be politicized. But unlike the leader of government business, my heart is still heavy. I live in a community where violence seems to run rampant. Just a couple weeks ago, I was at the local bar to get some food, and I heard gunshots. My best friend ran to the shop behind me to make sure that everything was good, everything was fine. And as I read this resolution, I believe it truly lacks the substance needed to combat those issues. But let me first commend the government for desiring to create the training programs for parents to prevent violence. I agree with the leader of government business that it takes a village to raise a child. I too was raised by that village, and I'm here to use that platform to speak for my village and the Barbadian society. So yes, that is a great initiative. However, I must state that their first point needs a bit more developing. They wish to create information campaigns using current data to raise awareness to the extent of marginalized groups, but they have failed to recognize the elderly, one of the more marginalized groups when it comes to violence. The elderly are easily taken advantage of. And I wish and I hope that the government would take into consideration to putting that into the resolution. Secondly, I wish to speak on the creation of mandatory social development programs. The leader of government business spoke on the importance of extracurricular activities. And we all agree that extracurricular activities play a role. I too was in basketball. I am a national chess player. I've been to Carifta. I've done swimming, everything that you could possibly think of. So I know the benefits of extracurricular activities. However, what I wish to emphasize is the mandatory part in this resolution. Forcing our children to partake in extracurricular activities that they otherwise would not have participated in would seemingly create more pushback. What we must do is make these extracurricular activities more appealing, Mr. Speaker. Because simply, if they do not wish to go, they will not. And that will create delinquency. We will label the children that don't go to these that don't participate in these mandatory extracurricular activities. But I speak no further on that. To continue, Mr. Speaker, they wish to reduce the appeal of alcohol. And I do believe that reducing the appeal of alcohol would prove to make sense. But they wish to go about reducing the appeal by raising alcohol prices. I know, Mr. Speaker, you, Mr. Speaker, everyone in this room, and the citizens of Barbados know that raising the prices of anything in high demand does not decrease consumption. Take sweet drinks for an example. The sweet drinks have been taxed and taxed and taxed, and yet we walk the streets in the morning and see school children with sweet drinks in their hand. For lunch, we'll probably have sweet drinks. So we know that raising prices will not deter alcohol drinkers. What we must do is educate. Thank you. What we must do is educate our citizens on the adverse effects of alcohol. What we must do is teach them and provide safe spaces for the chronic alcohol drinkers. I wish to commend the government for repurposing the NCSA to create fit-for-purpose programs. I do believe that would be a wonderful initiative. But to end off, I don't wish to just criticize our government, but actually provide another solution. I walked around my neighborhood and I asked members of the community what they would like to see. And they suggested they have programs where they can make money. Because in communities such as mine, hustling is very much the culture, to hustle. They would like youth entrepreneurship schemes so that they raise money for themselves and the community while taking part in the initiatives. My colleagues will further speak on everything else, and I am much obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. What point do you raise, Prime Minister?
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned that the honourable members on the other side insist on misleading this honourable House. So the honourable member made the point that reducing these sugar-sweetened beverages has had no impact on the consumption, but I have a study here that says that the weekly sale of SSBs decreased by 4.3% when we introduced that 10% ad valorem tax on sugar-sweetened beverages. There was a decrease in SSB sales of 3.6%. Sale of non-SSB drinks increased by 5.2%, with bottled water sales increasing by an average of 7.5%. I just would like to ask the honourable members on the other side to do a bit of research. I also want to refute a point that was made about forcing children. This government is not in the business of infringing on the rights of children. We're not forcing anybody. You have had mandatory programs in schools. You have had programs you had to attend in schools. We're not forcing and infringing on the rights of anyone, so I'd like the honourable member to just be cautious in making certain statements in this honourable House.
Honourable, you want to withdraw the comment relating to the statistics?
I stand on a point of elucidation.
Would you wish to withdraw the comment first and foremost?
The first comment as it pertains to sweet drinks. But I wish to...
And the comment on alcohol.
And the comment on alcohol.
Thank you.
But I do wish to clarify the point on extracurricular activities.
Sure.
He stated, yes, it has been made mandatory to participate in curricular activities during the school hours, during what is taught. What he's speaking about is what is written in the resolution is extracurricular activities. These activities is what the government wishes to make mandatory.
What point do you raise, Prime Minister?
I just, again, on a point of order, want to caution the honourable member on the other side. We're not in the business of playing semantics. Curricular activities, we're trying to promote the social development of young people.
No point found.
I called a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
A point of order is called if you're misleading the House. I don't have any evidence that he's misleading the House. You want to caution him. That's not misleading the House. You're cautioning him.
For misleading the House.
Thank you, honourable member. I recognize Ms. Bissam, but before you speak, I also want to recognize in the gallery Ms. Kim Ramsey from the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, who have also provided some training for the youth parliamentarians in preparation for this morning's debate. So thank you for coming, Mr. Ramsey. Ms. Bissam?
Mr. Speaker, honorable members, good morning. According to Generation Unlimited, the well-being of young people in Barbados, published by the Ministry of Youth and Empowerment, as well as UNICEF, from 2012 to 2016, recorded crimes by juveniles averaged 330 annually. 68% of children entering the juvenile liaison scheme were raised by a single female parent. 18 to 25-year-olds accounted for half of the murder perpetrators from 2009 to 2013. Does that scare you? Because it should. The youth need guidance and our parents need help. We cannot succeed until these objectives are met. Meaningful change. That is what we need. And I believe that this resolution is a step in the right direction. Specifically, the emphasis on training programs for parents and the requirement that all school-aged children participate in an extracurricular activity. Family is a primary social structure, and until we are able to pride ourselves on effective parents who we are confident will instill in the youth a strong desire to help and not hurt, we will continue to lose our able-minded people to juvenile crime. With reference to the previously mentioned publication, there was an average of 600 cases of child physical and emotional abuse reported annually from 2010 to 2017 to the Child Care Board, of which 80% of the perpetrators were the mothers, and nearly all of them were single parents or separated. Furthermore, under 40% had any employment income. Alongside this, I'd like to examine a recent academic journal published by UNICEF on violence against children in Latin America and the Caribbean, which included a study conducted in Barbados and Grenada. It found that participants who had experienced moderate to high levels of abuse in their youth were significantly more likely to engage in violent and hostile behavior than those who reported low levels of abuse. This suggests that poor parental capacity directly correlates to aggressive behavior in the youth. More importantly, there in black and white, the truth is glaring. Our parents are struggling, and struggle they will until we decide to acknowledge their fight. They cannot teach what they have not learnt, they cannot change if they do not know how, and they most certainly cannot win if they think they've already lost. And it is cruel to expect otherwise. By creating and expanding training programs for parents, we can address the risk factors that hinder them from being able to support their children holistically. I anticipate that with proper planning and a focus on mental health, we will be able to combat low parental involvement, low emotional attachment by parents and children, even poor financial management. Furthermore, we cannot ignore that we live in a technologically advancing world which brings with itself new impacts of which parents must be made aware of on how to cope and manage. Mainly, desensitization and the copycat effect. Many of the media we currently consume is littered with violence, and this can bring about a mimicking of violent content. Also, it can desensitize persons to factual tragedies. This is dangerous because if we as a society cannot recognize each other's losses, how are we ever going to make meaningful change? We will never regain the village that we so desperately want. And so we must effectively support our parents so that they can support the youth. I'd like to suggest that these parenting programs be year-round because parenting practices must change as children grow. An online component should also be considered because information needs to be readily and easily accessed, and an anonymous component can also be included. I'd also briefly like to address the proposal for making it a requirement that all school-aged children participate in a formal extracurricular activity, as I believe this maximizes the impact of the parenting programs. Extracurricular activities are a valuable tool in developing life skills. In this capacity, children will be able to apply all the skills such as critical thinking, communication, empathy, and problem solving that would have hopefully been taught by their parents. As stated by a recent study conducted by the World Health Organization, these skills allow children to manage emotions, deal with conflict, and communicate in an effective way and non-aggressive ways. reducing the risk of violent behavior. Furthermore, it was also stated that these skills can reduce the risk factors for violence, such as alcohol and drug use. Worthy of note also is that extracurriculars are an asset to employers, and the proposal makes the allowance for participation in activities outside of educational institutions once it is established. This way, no one is pigeonholed, and persons are free to explore all the island has to offer. As I conclude, I leave you with the following. Barbadians, we've trembled, we've cried, we've had to wave many goodbyes. But now it's time to say we survived to thrive. We have a violence crisis. Does that scare you? Because it should. I reiterate, the youth need guidance and our parents need help. We cannot succeed until these are achieved. We like to operate by do not panic. We no longer have that privilege. We must panic because we cannot afford to remain static. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm much obliged to you.
Thank you. Well, we have a full house. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Affairs, Ms. Yolande Howard, as well as Sergeant Weeks from the Barbados Police Service, who would have also facilitated training for the youth parliamentarians today. So thank you for being here physically in the public gallery. I now recognize the Honorable Member Tanis.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me properly? Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Speaker, honorable members, guests. For the year 2022, there have been at least 15 murders from the period January to June 2022. 10 of these murders are shootings, and 5 of these murders are stabbings. 7 of these murders thus far are committed by young men in the age range of 25 to 34 years old, Mr. Speaker. All these murders were committed by young men. It is clear we have a serious problem in this country. My speech today will highlight a few challenges that give rise to gun violence in our society, especially in our young people. I will also seek to highlight what are some possible solutions that are not in the resolution to minimize gun violence in Barbados. Now, I must commend the government. In the resolution, I see a lot of possible, amazing programs and suggestions and solutions in this resolution, but I honestly think that there is more that can be done. This cannot be just it. I honestly believe that there is more to be done. And the way how certain things are worded, as my colleagues have stated, rightfully so, the way certain things are worded is not, the way how certain things are worded, I will speak on today because I honestly feel that the reason why we are here as an opposition is to not just criticize, but to help. We are all here today for one thing, for solutions. And that is what I will help to do today, sir. I honestly feel that there is a lack of nurturing towards young men in Barbados. There's a stigma in society that portrays young men to be these hard-back individuals. The educational system in Barbados does not accommodate the learning styles of males and superannuates them when they reach the age of 16 years old. We need more positive influences in our young men's lives. We do. This is made worse, these problems are made worse by the lack of support at home because of parents with poor socialization and parenting skills to motivate their youngsters. Young men abandoned by the educational system at a very impressionable young age are vulnerable to be involved in gang activity in order to find the acceptance that is missing from the formal structures in society. Now, I would like to add a point to the resolution that is not here. I honestly believe that we need there is an economic crisis towards the employment rate regarding young men or young people in Barbados. The unemployment rate for the youth of Barbados stands at 12.79% as of 2020. Because of this high unemployment rate, young men from poor economic backgrounds will obviously look for other means and ways to make money, especially with the increase in cost of living, which is estimated to be around 12%. Now, we have all these programs, as the government has listed here, all of these programs in place, which I honestly believe is an amazing thing, as I said. But at the end of the day, we all need a way to live in this society. We all need money. We all need a way to cope with the way how things are rising in society. These programs, yes, are very amazing and wonderful, but these young men need a way to live at the end of the day. That's what they're looking for, a way to live, a way to cope. We also need more control.
Remember, please wind up. We have about a minute and a half left.
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We need more control in the importation of guns. Ultimately, we need to reduce the access to illegal guns entering the country because they're coming. We do not manufacture guns, as the Attorney General has stated. We don't, so they're coming in somehow. We need to find a way to reduce the access to these illegal guns. As my leader of opposition has stated, gun amnesties. We do need to encourage illegal firearm holders to surrender their weapons without penalties, but as he rightfully said, it could go both ways. But I honestly think the government needs to look into that as a possible solution as well. The government spent over $20 million in the installation of scanners, but unfortunately the country went without scanners for 18 months. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that we need lucrative rewards, and we need, my leader of opposition has stated, we need ways to bring up our young men. It takes a village to raise a child. It does. And as I conclude, I would just like to commend the government, and I would like to say that in recent times, we need to understand, there's an important factor that we need to understand, is that these young men, the victims of these shootings and the victims in gun violence are no longer just gang members. It is the public as well. As our honorable members have stated, as I conclude, they use Caesar, who has died recently by a gun shooting, as an example. And I would also like to say I know of him. And from what I know, he was never involved in any gang activities, but just to show you that you don't need to be in gang activities now to be a victim of gun violence or violence, period. He was just with the wrong person and hanging around the wrong company, which is why I said earlier we need more positive influences in our young men. So I conclude, Mr. Speaker, and I oblige to you. Thank you.
You have the floor, Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Before I do my contribution to this resolution this morning, I first want to acknowledge and give thanks to everyone that have played a role in my development which allowed me to be here today. Sir, when I had first entered the gates of community college, the first question that my management tutor had asked the class was the first question that my management tutor had asked is whether an individual could shape an environment, or whether the environment could shape the individual. And sir, that question had me pondering for days and weeks on end, because as you can appreciate, is a very complex one. It's a question that is similar to whether the chicken come before the egg, per se. And after critically analyzing the question and doing research, I had come to the conclusion that the environment does indeed shape the individual. The reason I say that is because development should be seen in three spheres. It should be social infrastructure and economical development. Now, the government, after assuming office in 2018, recognized that those three spheres are very important. And as you can appreciate, sir, and the members in here, that prior to 2018, the road network in this country was shameful. It was not one to brag about. It was not one to even invite your friends and family from abroad to truthfully come and spend a holiday here in the country, because it's not one to show. As you can appreciate also, the housing solutions for us, the people of Barbados, were slim. And after assuming office in 2018, actually, the government made it available for the youth in particular to have a chance to own a piece of the rock. Sir, the government took that angle to help restore faith within the youth in this country. As we move on to social problems that which the government had addressed and found solutions for, the first one that comes to mind, truthfully, and the one that is very dear to my heart, and hopefully it would be close to the members in here, is the fact that we got back free, subsidized fees at university, which allowed us as a people to dream again and to hope and to look forward for the future and the many treasures it will also bring. The other social problem that is dear to my heart, sir, considering that I come from St. John, is the water woes. The water woes was one that we could speak on at length. I had to endure that pain for 2 years or so.
At what point do you raise?
Say raise the point of order. I would just like to understand what's the relevance of what he's saying, because we're talking about violence
No
and
point
I'm
found.
hearing about water.
Continue.
Thank you, sir. Honorable member, if you would listen to me carefully, you would then see why I am saying all
Honourable
these
members, I
things.
just asked for you to familiarize yourself with the point. Let's not waste my time or the members' time. Familiarize yourself with the point of order and point of information.
All right,
and the
sir.
point of elucidation. Point of order, if a member is misleading the House. A point of information, if you're bringing facts. And point of elucidation, if you want to clarify a point made. I'm not going to tolerate all this nonsense, standing up for no reason.
Exactly.
Continue, member.
Thank you, sir. As I was saying, the water woes in the country is one of which is close to my heart, considering my past. But essentially, the reason I am trying to draft or paint this picture is to allow the individuals in the House to understand that the environment shapes it shapes the person. And if the environment is not one that one could grow, if the environment is not one that one could dream, if the environment is one that one could seek to do better for themselves and their families, sir, then the slightest thing would trigger them to then go to violence and commit acts that we've seen here recently. Now, sir, I also want to shed light on the resolution, because in my opinion, the resolution is quite innovative. The reason why I say that is that, let me give an example about John. John is an individual that lives in Haynesville. He goes to school at Bamir.
Up and on.
So John is hesitant to pose questions within his class because of his low self-esteem. And whenever he actually builds up the courage to do so, his colleagues then pushes him around and calls him names and stuff like that. And then after school, he is quick to head home with all that shame and anger built up inside of him. When he gets home, the first person that he comes to is his younger brother, and he then unleashes the anger, the stress, and the pain that of which he had of which he have gotten from school. The reason why I give that example is that based on the resolution, it seeks to create the mandatory social development programs in schools. And sir, the honorable member Holder had said that he has said that by us forcing the youth in this country to do so, that we would then lead them to do things that they may not want to do.
What point do you raise? And I hope this is a very good point.
On a point of elucidation, to clarify, I never said that by forcing them to I never said that by forcing them to do things that they may not want to do. Could you repeat? Why is it?
Honorable, please continue.
Thank you. I don't know why the opposition is currently always raising on the points
I know, but your
that
time
have
was
no
up.
relevance.
I'll
Yes,
give
sir.
you an additional minute or two.
I
because
do
of the
appreciate that.
interruption.
But he did indeed say that by forcing the youth to do things that they may not want to, but then lead them to do things that they actually would not want to do further. But the reason why you raise that point, sir, is to ask the member whether his mother never asked him to do something that he may not be in favor of, but then it was actually the best thing for him. Relating it back to community college, we had mandatory courses, and the courses I was not in favor of actually give me a sound mind into who I am today.
What point do you raise?
Sir, I rise on a point of order. The honorable member is misleading the House. My member said no such thing. And he promised us this was relevant, and we don't see the relevance.
Member, you want to clarify your point or strike it from the record? I'll have it struck from the
Well,
record.
the reason, well, I would wish to clarify the point, because the resolution seeks the resolution seeks to allow school children to mandatory do extracurricular activities. And by allowing that to go through, or for the resolution to pass, it would then allow the youth to truthfully take advantage of the activities that they may think may not be best for them, but truthfully, sir, it may actually be the best thing for them. As I move on a little further,
As you conclude.
Sorry?
As you conclude.
As I conclude. Okay, as I conclude with one more point, relating it back to the example of which I have brought forth with John and his brother. That's a perfect example of which, if his mother had the proper training to at least address and understand and resolve the issue within the household, then we would not have cases of which John would then approach his brother with that hatred and anger and pain, and then trigger him then to continue to spread that cancer that we currently have within our country. And in closing, sir, I now wish to make the call for the private sector and the other groups and NGOs within the country, sir, let's take a holistic approach and a whole Barbados approach to violence. Because we need to get the resources, truthfully, to help understand the root causes for the problems that we face within this country. And sir, with those few words, I am obliged.
Thank you. I would also like to recognize the presence of Mr. Wendell Callender, who would have also facilitated training for the youth parliamentarians, but also was a former chairman of the committees in the 90s of the Barbados Parliament. So thank you so much, Mr. Calendar, for your presence here this morning. I recognize the opposition member, Peters.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to all the other members. With all due respect, now that we're back on the topic of violence, let's continue. With all respect to the honorable member. My opening statements today will be coming from the great Bob Marley. No woman, no cry, no woman, no cry. But the truth is, I see a lot of mothers crying at present. Two notable figures in the last 2 years. I want to also open by saying rest in peace DeMarco, rest in peace Tyrese Caesar. Gone but not forgotten. DeMarco, who would have succumbed to his injuries not so long ago, 2 years ago to be specific, on June 14th, he was only 10 years old if you recall. I don't know if anybody in here remembers him, but hopefully we do, because it's something that is quite relevant. He was struck in his head by his playmates and left in a coma, hospitalized. His mother is Trisha Gibbs. I couldn't imagine today how she feels. I don't know if she's seeing this today, but Ms. Gibbs, we feel your pain. Every other day, you open your phone, you open any kind of news outlet, and you will find shooting this place, shooting that place. It could be a food place, it could be a business place, you don't know when. Earlier, the honorable member from the government, she started waving her hand. Mr. Speaker, I was terrified because I didn't even know, we didn't have a security check this morning. I wondered how she get down here. That's the truth. I was terrified, I was shaking in my boots because we need to look at the things such as security. I mentioned not having a security check. In my mock debate, I brought up the fact that we had a problem with the scanners at the ports. But one could argue that it might not be the Barbados port that's the problem, it might be the untouchables in Barbados, because this is something that we don't like to address. This is the white elephant in the room. The powerful people in Barbados that, they bring a lot of business, they help the economy, so we refuse to touch them and address all the corruption that occurs in the country. Moving on. 19% of our population is between the ages 10 to 24, which is a significant number, which is a fifth of the population. We now live in a global and diverse world where all views must contain and the rights and very human dignity of all Barbadians must be protected. Youth Parliament is about one view, one voice. On this resolution, the government and the opposition can stand to cooperate on these issues and to further go about de-escalating violence in all its forms, be it domestic, police against the youth, because that's something we don't want to talk about. I commend the police force for certain actions they take, but the truth is, our boys get rough up in Bajan terms when the police come for them, though, if I'm speaking in layman terms. The Honorable the leader of government business mentioned earlier, since we're on the topic of African proverbs, he mentioned that the village raises us. I don't disagree, but I'll also combat it with this. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth, and that is what we're witnessing today. We must begin looking at the questions. Why are the elderly or the village afraid to talk to the young people? Why are the young people shying away from church? All the fundamentals that would have raised people in here, I assume. They're religious bodies, but guess what? When you attend church, what do you hear? Murmurs. Whether it be dress, appearance, things that you may not be able to control because of your financial situation or just your general background. These things shy us away from looking to get help. So eventually, these young people will tell themselves, well, I don't want to hear Miss Elliott or whoever resides in the village. So forgive me, leader government business, if we don't want to hear what the people of the village have to say anymore, because it's never anything positive. When you do anything positive, it's pushed to the side. We as a society, whether national or on a global level, we tend to remember the one wrong as opposed to the 99 rights. Moving further along, we talked about in the resolution, it was mentioned about mandatory extracurricular activity. I propose that we serve, I can't use that language within the house, but we serve ish as chocolate. So even though it might not be the most fun thing for children, I think there are different ways to make people engage. So for example, if Mr. Holder and myself are approaching lunchtime, everybody want to eat. You look at the time and say, you know what, maybe 40 minutes before so they don't get distracted and think about lunch. So you do a quick exercise. Like we would have seen in our training for Youth Parliament, we would have seen how we had an icebreaker and different activities to engage and socialize. What we're missing in modern day is socialization. Our children don't know how to interact with each other without going home for a gun or going back home for a knife or just looking to fight. In the old days, you would just do a little race to see who faster and then you settle that problem. But nowadays, the first thing is to take another life.
You have 2 more minutes, member.
I want to also touch on the topic of reform. If we look at somewhere like the Netherlands, in The Guardian, an article in The Guardian, which was looking at psychiatrist Melina Rackett, we work on 2 aims, and I quote, we work on 2 aims. Number 1, preventing another crime, and then on psychiatric suffering and the social problems that come with it. Also, I quote, nobody would approve of the crimes or violence they have committed, but there's a very sad world behind them. If you want to mend all this, it will take a long time. In short, we need to find out why they're doing it. Why is John Brown so angry when he gets in a situation where he feels the need to kill another man? The Honorable Member mentioned the funeral, and I've been disheartened, for lack of better words, as it pertains to just traversing this world. Even if you're doing good, it feels as though there's no silver lining. We need to do a better, in addition, we need to do a better job at censoring information. And I say that as it relates to preventing with the training programs, also implementing the training programs. Even if it requires that we do an online scan for the ID, we not only make these companies liable, but it's our own liability when you have a 10-year-old, for example, that idolizes a rapper toting a gun and just engaging in drug use. So we need to go about ways to censor the information and the media that our children are engaging in, because the truth is they're not getting it from nowhere. They're seeing it. They're trying to embody it. We need to, my colleague mentioned mentorship. We need to get back to real membership and having real role models. I'll try to close with this.
Please, because I was interested in the Netherlands statistics, because I know the Prime Minister likes to be in Amsterdam, right? But your time really up. So you need to continue and wind up.
Understood, Mr. Speaker. 2 days before I go, I noticed that there are no lawmakers and no members of Parliament, even if they're busy, no people that are responsible for dictating public policy in this country to hear our perspectives and then go about implementing it. So I definitely think that that is one of the issues. We're being told as youth to share our voice, share our opinions, but where are they going? They're falling on deaf ears. I'll leave you with this.
I understand that, cabinet. That's probably why.
The great Bob Marley also said, let's get together and we'll be all right. I want that for us, I want that for Wider Barbados, and I want that for the youth coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize the Honorable Boyce.
Honorable members, Mr. Speaker, colleagues, good morning. Lives every day are being taken due to violence. Lots of stories not being told, lots of voices being silenced. Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today to speak about why I think training programs should be created, expanded, so parents have the opportunity to have a structuring, loving, and healthy relationship with their child, and it will also help to prevent violence. I will first talk about substance abuse and how children are compelled to try it because it is accessible to them in their home. If a child has a lot of exposure to drugs in their home, or they witness their parents consuming drugs regularly, they will be compelled to take it. They will be curious about why their parents are taking these drugs, these drugs every day. So it will compel them to experiment with it, which can be very dangerous because it can lead to future addiction. Not only this, they can also encourage their other friends, their other schoolmates, peers to consume these drugs, which will cause a viral chain reaction. And from also consuming these drugs, for example, alcohol, it can also bring about or cause violent or negative behavior. A report was done in 2020 by the Pan American Health Organization stating that in Barbados, the percentage for lifetime use is 78.6%. The use last year was 56.5%, and the use last month was 29.7%. I will then slightly stray away to now physical violence via bullying. Children who are abused at home by their parents, guardians, tend to express their pent-up emotions that they are not allowed or aren't able to release at home in other ways. For example, at school, on a weaker child who will most likely not have the opportunity to fight back. This will also give the child a sense of empowerment. Statistics, a report was done by the UNICEF which identified that high percentages of children are experiencing physical exploitation in many Caribbean countries, 89% in Jamaica and 77% in Trinidad and Tobago. It has also been noted that there is no differentiation in terms of abuse, whether it takes place in or out of school, because it is considered as part of a cultural norm. These hard acts and behaviors have now become normalized in our culture, normalized in society, and this is a major issue which we cannot dismiss anymore. My last point, I would like to talk about domestic violence. As my fellow colleague has mentioned earlier, that research has been concluded by UN Representative for Women, Tony Broadbent, that 243 million women and girls between the ages of 15 to 49 have experienced sexual and or physical violence by an intimate partner within 2021. Reports also done by the OECS have stated that there has been a 38% increase in reported causes of domestic violence during lockdown in Barbados. When a child is raised in a toxic environment and they witness their father inflicting violent acts upon their mother, and it is a regular occurrence, this behavior becomes normalized to the child, which they can later take with them in society. For example, if there is a fellow student at school that has different views from them or a different opinion, they will react in the only way they know how to, which is violently, because they have no other knowledge on how to peacefully resolve conflicts. This does not only apply to schoolmates, this can also apply to romantic relationships or non-romantic relationships, as the child can grow up to abuse their romantic partner in the future. This is why it is fundamental for these training programs to be created or made available to give persons the tool to amicably deal with conflict resolution, and it will also give parents and children the opportunity to have something they didn't have before. The opportunity to have a loving, healthy, and strong relationship with each other. So the cases where substance abuse will lead to violence, physical violence via bullying, and domestic violence, those cases will decrease significantly. I would just like to conclude that I agree with the resolution, And I would like to finish once again by saying lives are being taken away almost every day due to violence. Lots of stories not being told, lots of voices being silenced. I would also like to reference to an opposing honorable member by finally ending by saying, a child who is not embraced by the village will light it on fire to feel its warmth. Thank you, I oblige.
Thank you. Before the honorable member speaks, I also like to recognize the representatives from UNICEF, Lisa McLean-Trotman, and I had mentioned him earlier as a friend, but I really should have used the organization he's represented, Mr. Kareem Smith from UNICEF, who are great partners with the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community Empowerment. So thank you so much for being here this afternoon now to observe these proceedings. Recognize the member, the opposition member. Mark Barker. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, Mr. Speaker, honorable members. I rise to speak on the resolution proposed by the government. Aristotle once said, the purpose of knowledge is action, not knowledge. It is upon this premise that I ask the question, if information campaigns aimed at raising awareness on the behalf of marginalized persons is the appropriate measure. The government proposes a creation of the expansion of victim identification, care, and support programs by the Royal Barbados Police Force. Again, I ask this question. Do we just want to know who the victims are and provide support? Is information our only aim? As a country, is it our aim to only treat the wound, or is our aim to prevent the fall? The government also purports that the Public Affairs Department adequately publicizes the agencies available to assist victims. Mr. Speaker, it appears to me that the solution to violence is to assist victims of violence only. The World Health Organization defines violence as the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a group or community, which either results in or has a high likelihood of injury, maldevelopment, death, psychological harm, and deprivation. So on the face of it, Mr. Speaker, a very serious issue. The main types of violence usually experienced and are presently plaguing the society are physical violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, and physical violence, all of which males are the protagonists. Now, this is an alarming thing to me because standing here today, I'm a young male. I see clearly what the issue is, but yet this resolution makes no mention to the perpetrators. The whole resolution is aimed at assisting the victim. We need to be more efficient.
Prime Minister, what point you raise?
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member again is misleading this House and taking Barbadians down a very strange path. Mr. Speaker, sir, if you look at the resolution, or if the honourable member rather would look at the resolution, we've mentioned several things. The creation of information campaigns used to raise public awareness to the existence and extent of violence against marginalized groups. We spoke to the creation and expansion of training programs for parents with the aim of preventing violence by reinforcing safe and stable and nurturing environments, creation of mandatory social development programs. Mr. Speaker, sir, this resolution is not focused on the victims. We talk about prevention and we talk about treatment. We're trying to prevent the violence, but we're also treating to those persons who have been victims of the violence. We have brought to you a comprehensive resolution. So I would like the honorable member on the other side to just take some time to read through the resolution and present to us factual statements on the state of affairs we're debating today.
Thank you, honorable member. I believe he should be more aware because this resolution was circulated well in advance. So, 12th of July, so point found. Honorable member? Caution you not to mislead yourself.
Carrying on, it is against this backdrop that I ask the question, why should our efforts be focused on victims when we are aware who are the perpetrators of such violence? Because I was getting to my question, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
We are aware that the victims are in fact in need of assistance. No one is denying this fact, sir. But it's apparent to me that the statistics do show that males are the protagonists of this violence. So why not address the violence at the root cause? Mr. Speaker, sir, it is upon this same premise that I carry on by saying that the socialization of males within the society is clear to me as the issue here. We need to be members of a society that promote and we need to promote and also encourage healthy social and cultural norms within our development of males. There has been mentioned so often to the community. Now, it's my belief that the community is failing us as a social organ. Now, there's a hyper masculinity effect well at play within our society, and this effect has led to the repression of male emotions, which often tends to manifest in violence. It is clear when measured against the backdrop of the socialization of females within this country that there's more that can be done by all members of the society to ensure that we are enforcing healthy norms, because it seeks to undermine the influence of the social factors that influence violence when we only speak to victims, when we only speak to the issue after. The solutions are often reactionary. I am standing here before you all I am begging you. I am heavy-hearted. I am hurting. Because that's exactly what it does to me. When we at all points, we seek to point fingers. Is this body responsible? Is the church responsible? Is it the community? Is it the parents? Everybody has their role to play, and that is true. But we need to be cognizant of what exactly we are teaching, what type of social skills we are passing on. Because it's clear that the males are not supported within the society as they should be. Continuing on.
As you conclude.
Pardon me?
As you conclude, 2 minutes.
Okay. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, give me a second here. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, there is a recognition within the government mandate with regards to the school initiative that idleness contributes to violence. Mr. Speaker, I have my queries about the solution to this being social development programs and mandatory extracurricular activities. There needs to be an education, may I suggest education reform. Oftentimes, there's a focus on academia. No, it's clear to me within the resolution that there's an allusion to idleness being at the root cause of the youth partaking in violence. No, this idleness doesn't stem from anywhere. We don't just decide one day that we are going to be idle. You don't just decide one day that you're going to absent yourself from extracurricular activities and social development programs are not good, but it may suggest a fresh approach. I stand before you to suggest a fresh approach in that we need to release the focus on academia. This focus on academia severely limits the ceiling for, we live in a hands-on community. We live in a community where there's a part to play for everyone. Yet academia is the only thing promoted within our school system until the tertiary level. Oftentimes, the impact of this is to leave a lot of males on the periphery. And the impact of that, because this is a trickle effect, we need to take into account that is a multifaceted approach to addressing violence. The trickle effect at play here is that when we do not provide these opportunities for our youth, then they fall away from the system. They're unable to access job opportunities, access vital organs within our society, so that they're not at risk. We don't need to be generating at-risk youth. We need to provide education that appeals to everyone, that addresses everyone's situation. The focus on academia, having reduced the impact. The focus on academia reduces severely the impact that these males are able to play on our society.
Thank you.
In turn, sorry, Mr. Speaker, I see that I'm concluding, I promise. I'm concluding.
I'll give you 10 seconds for your final point.
Right, so all I'm getting to is that basically this lack of vocational opportunities then leaves a lot of our males on the periphery. They're unable to access vital organs within our society, and then this leads to the same block culture that I have heard bemoaned within this parliament today. No, we don't want to emphasize the block culture as the root cause of this, because, as I said, the social factors are relevant. We can't say that we are going to provide mandatory programs to address the idleness and don't address the root cause of that said idleness. So it is upon this note that I finally conclude, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member Zahara, you have the floor. Spencer.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members, I would first like to start by sharing a statistic. The homicide rate recorded for this year, 2022, in Barbados was 14 homicides for every 100,000 people. How many more lives must be lost to the violence plaguing our society for this issue of violence to be taken seriously? What else must happen in order for us to take this issue and do something about it? We shouldn't have to wait for a rise in the number of homicides or number of reported cases of violence for us to take action. We need to start now. And this resolution is a step in the right direction. When I looked at the resolution, I was pleased to see the proposition to create a mandatory social development program in our schools requiring school-age children to participate in mandatory extracurricular activities. I think that this would be extremely beneficial in keeping the Barbadian youth from participating in violence. Children resort to violence for a number of reasons, one being the combination of socioeconomic factors such as poverty, unemployment, and severe deprivation. These extracurricular activities would keep children focused on more productive endeavors and present new opportunities for them to achieve success by growing their interests and helping them to learn important qualities so that they may flourish and become positive contributors to our society. In a study conducted by Joseph L. Mahoney, it was shown that participation in extracurricular activities in youth was linked to low levels of antisocial behavior and aggression. This is what we need. Now, slightly moving away from my previous topic, Mr. Speaker, I would like to speak on another reason why children, youth, may resort to violence. And I believe that this is because of the issue of the influence of domestic violence and child abuse. Children who witness violence are constantly learning from the people around them, especially their parents or caregivers. Tell me, how are these children supposed to know the difference between right and wrong if their parents and caregivers do not know the difference themselves? These training programs in this resolution for caregivers and parents would allow them to learn and develop the correct tools in order to create a safe, nurturing environment for children to grow up in. Moving on to my last point, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to share a statistic reported by UN representatives stating that during the pandemic, there was a 38% increase in reported cases of domestic violence. Now, I'm going to share something even more disturbing. In regards to information found in the IDB Technical Note 1059, it was stated that back in the period of 2000 to 2007, 1/5 of murders in Barbados were as a result of domestic violence. And in the cases of these murders, all of the victims were women. I will reiterate, all of the victims were women. And I'm sharing this statistic with you to say that this issue did not just start now. This issue has been around for years. And if we don't do something, it will continue to grow into a larger issue. In the year of 2020, UN Representative Tony Broadberg stated that research showed a 125% increase in domestic violence in March of 2020. And in April of that same year, an 88% increase, indicating a trend. This violence against marginalized communities and groups in Barbados need to be brought to the public's attention. These disgraceful statistics are not being shared. Therefore, the people in our country are not properly educated on how dangerous of an issue this is. Other marginalized communities, such as the LGBTQI community and the disabled, suffer from hate crimes directed towards them almost every day. However, despite the existence of these very real problems, not many people are educated on the severity and extent to which these violent acts are committed. In the resolution presented by the government, it is stated that the creation of information campaigns using current data to raise public awareness for the existence and extent to violence against these marginalized communities. This could be a crucial step towards preventing the violent crimes by communicating these concerns to the public. Our people need to be educated on these violent crimes which affect them, helping them to feel less alone and come forward with their own concerns.
Please wrap up.
In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the measures stated in this resolution could be crucial for the prevention of violence in Barbados. Creating healthy environments for the youth, creating mandatory social development programs, and creating campaigns to spread awareness. These are all fundamental for the safety and future of our people. We shouldn't have to wait for this situation to worsen to take action. We need to start now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm obliged to you.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to make a motion that we pause for a 10-minute recess and reconvene at 12:40.
Second.
Honorable members, the question is that this House suspends for 10 minutes until 12:40. All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. You think the ayes have it. This House currently suspends until 12:40.